And last of all the major storylines in the first two Lord of the Rings episodes, we come to the Southlands, which, as we now know, are Mordor before it was Mordor. That there must have been stuff there before Sauron got there in the Second Age. We only recently found out about this. They clarified in a regional video like 2 weeks after San Diego Comic-Con, so very recently. Up until now, like back when I was talking about the teaser, they just said it's Tir Harad, which means South Tower. So we thought, is this Harad or something on the coast, or even early before Gondor was there? No, this is Mordor. And I thought that this might be that they were resettling the defeated Easterlings from Beleriand's wars there, like on a reservation almost. That when I think of the Easterlings, like fought in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears in Beleriand, these are other Easterlings. There's a lot of Easterlings. Morgoth basically conquered the entire world except for the elf kingdoms in Beleriand that were opposing him, and you don't hear about it that much in the narrative. It's just the rest of the land is in darkness. So it's not like a reservation. This is one of many different kingdoms, like Harad, like Khand, like Rhûn, were all under the sway of Morgoth during the First Age. So they are, I wouldn't say imprisoned there. They're not. It's not a reservation. It's an occupation. So this is an invention, but I think it kind of makes sense that, okay, Gil-galad as the High King after Morgoth is defeated would probably send distant messages to Sylvan elves out in the world to maintain a guard over the defeated Easterlings and stuff to make sure they don't build new armies. They don't go into it in too much detail, but in broad strokes, that could have happened. That's actually an interesting, it's an open question of, like, what happened to all the Easterlings that fought for Morgoth? So this is an invented thing in general principle. It's actually a pretty nifty idea to develop this, particularly because this is where the orcs would come back first. They wouldn't come back, in the elves' backyard in Lindon or Eriador or even the Misty Mountains, because the dwarves are still powerful in Khazad-dûm. That the whole point is they regroup and first appear in and around Mordor. And the other thing is, well, Mordor, what could it be like? I hope they don't go, oh, they turned it completely into ash. We'll have to ask them, because they meant this to be a secret. And I've talked about this in the other stuff, that when they're going through Mordor, Frodo and Sam, and it's just this volcanic desert from Cirith Ungol to Mount Doom, Sam goes, what the heck do orcs eat? There's nothing here. And then the narration takes an aside, and Tolkien says, Sam couldn't know it, but the plateau of Gorgoroth is the northwest of Mordor. This is like their industrial heartland, with all the mines and forges are all here for weapons. But Sam couldn't know that there's these vast slave-tilled fields in the south and east of Mordor, around the inland sea, Lake Nirnen. And so the lands of Nirn in the south, and the maps on screen have been a little inconsistent, that the first one showed it like in the northwest corner of Nirn, like at the border with the plateau of Gorgoroth. First episode, I think, intentionally obscured it, like the camera showed the map at a weird angle, and it looked like it was east of Mordor. It could have been Khand. But then the second episode, the map pretty clearly showed that tree on the map was in the, like, southwest corner of the square of Mordor. So I think we're solidly in Nirn, not in Gorgoroth. Minor details, but it's a difference between this will turn into a volcanic desert or this will turn into slave-tilled fields. Of how much are they going to devastate the landscape in this is a question, because there's people living there, there's farms there. So the general idea of this is where you see the orcs first returning, because it's Mordor, and establishing it, and this is the orcs were hiding in tunnels for centuries. Great idea. Like with the Harfoot storyline, with these purely invented characters and purely invented storylines, they're presentable. And the dialogue can even be good, well, pleasant, because the high elves like Galadriel and Gil-galad have the twin weights behind them of, these are established characters, so you have to worry about canon. And on top of that, high elves speak very formally. The Vulcan speak thing. But like when you switch to the Harfoots, the writers are free, the TV writers are free to just make up dialogue, make up characters without contradicting established things. I can't really say Nori Brandyfoot is acting out of character as you might for Galadriel or something. Or even Gil-galad, who isn't, in a movie, speaking role in the movies before, has details about him in the books and the type of person he was that some people would, are going to pick on. But like Arondir and Bronwyn in the Southlands were decent. I mean, the dialogue was there, the actors elevated. It wasn't bad dialogue. It was just, it's not Tolkien level dialogue because he never wrote anything, but it doesn't detract from it. The actors managed to sell it pretty well. I really like the Arondir actor because he has a lot with very little. But he's not as formal and ethereal as the High Elves, which is good, because he just comes off as the strong, stoic type. And that I was worried they'd build up the romance too much. Instead, I think, and I hope they're going for, and this is a trope I like, the courtly love thing. The steadfast tin soldier who quietly pines after the woman he can't have. I can't have her, I'm a stalker. We can never be together. Our love can never be. And inwardly he feels bad about it, but he's got to maintain his stiff upper lip because he's a soldier and all that. So, first episode was a little slow. I was worried they were going to get too far into that. But no, like by the end of the episode, particularly the second episode, it dives into action for him. And it's not as focused on that. And I actually do think the writing was pretty good in this sense, not dialogue, in the sense of they were smart enough to seed things early on that pay off later and not just drop obvious hints. Things that caught even me by surprise, that I will tell you, when I said, there's points where I genuinely smiled in this show. I did not pick up on that Bronwyn's son Theo, when he said, I didn't sleep well. The scratching of the mice under the floorboards kept me up all night. We need to do something about that. They're really noisy. That was in the first episode. I only remembered that just as the first orc came through the floorboards in the second episode. Of just, that they set that up. I did not anticipate that at all. So an episode in advance, they're laying clues for something later. On top of that, if you pay attention to the dialogue, without being heavy-handed about it, but just if you're paying attention, they make stray mentions of, is it another landquake? And, maybe the grass went bad just from, toxic vapors. Sometimes we get toxic vapors around the hot springs near the lake. That they've established that this is a volcanic region. That they get earthquakes and ground tremors are not unknown. And sometimes even get toxic fumes, that this is like relatively near Mount Doom, maybe Nirnan, but still relatively near the plateau of Gorgoroth. This is broadly, I don't know how close it is, but laying hints that this is a region where there's volcanic activity, and you have to pay attention that they're doing it. Tell me in the comments if you ever noticed when they were saying that. And the other things I wonder about, there's a difference between appealing to the returning book fans and then just movie fans who don't know what they're doing. How much of it was a surprise to people that this is Mordor, part of Mordor anyway, the south with the fields and stuff. Did people pick up on that? There's quakes and stuff. Now I did, but we already had that video saying it's southern Mordor on a map. But the mice thing, completely by surprise. And I don't know if it was scratching from the orc tunnels that he thought was mice. We also saw mice running past Arondir later, so it might have been the mice running from their tunneling. Same thing. I did not pick up on that. So it was a little slow when it's just, wait, what is this place? What are they doing? It didn't dwell on that. And the second episode ended with a really, really impressive fight scene with practical effects. That they made one orc scary. Think about it. This was an amazing fight scene. It's played like a horror scene. One orc is dangerous, not just Aragorn's mowing down dozens of them. That's focus bias, because, Aragorn's this great warrior with decades of training. It's not just that. These people aren't slouches. They know how to hunt animals and stuff. Let me verbalize this. Something that's always scared me is the idea of a home invasion, like burglary. Like, Anyone's brave when you're on the battlefield, where you're prepped for, I'm going there to fight people, I've got armor on, or I've got guns, I've got weapons. Being woken up middle of the night, taken unawares, or I'm just sitting at my kitchen table drinking a coffee, and then suddenly someone bursts through the door behind me, home invasion style. If you're caught off guard, and it's just, or like a zombie infestation, it's not, I'm going to go fighting the zombies, I'm here loaded down with guns. It's zombie crash into your house in the middle of the night. And you just have to get whatever improvised weapons you can grab from around you. So I think they did a nice balance with that it's not that Bronwyn is this Amazon warrior, nor is she this weakling. It's, whoa, I just stepped in, there's an orc here, let me grab a kitchen knife, grab a chair to whack it with. Horror movie thing, we've all seen a lot of horror movie tropes here. Just the camera work, I yelled a lot about the cinematography before. This was standout cinematography, and there was no CGI in it, because they went back to prosthetic orcs, which is great. So just in terms of the fight choreography, and I've said, Game of Thrones had problems with this, that they would insist on, no, we have to focus on, this would be showing off the lead actors mugging tight close-ups. This knew how to film a horror scene as tension, but not being ridiculous about it, and just the plot logic of, non-verbal plot logic of, I stabbed it with something, but it threw me off, but then the knife still in its back got caught on something, so I was able to run away. The knife in it, and she just manages to maneuver to a point where she gets an axe to its neck. That was really well done. It made one orc scary, in terms of just the slow burn of, oh, I keep hearing mice scratching under my floorboards, and they were tunneling. That's where they were. Second episode, that was really good. That went from, if I reviewed these one at a time, I really didn't like the Southlands thing in the first episode, because I couldn't get a feel for it. But the second one, where it's not really leaning into the romance stuff, it's just a little understated, but then Arondir's going to Bronwyn like, whoa, this cow is poisoned, it ate poisoned grass, let's go check that out, because I'm a guard, and it's just, he's not really leaning into the romance thing. The orc setup, that it was, you needed to air this as two parts, not just because this was good, because that was, the first episode was the slow burn setup for the orc reveal here. I think the Arondir actor did a pretty good role. It's mostly a physical role, the stoic guy has a lot of action scenes, but he does it well. He's likable because he's an archetype, but he's good. So, other than that it was a little slow at first, which I keep saying, but I don't blame them for that. They're okay getting a feel for it. I wonder what Bronwyn's going to do next with everyone. But with them at least, culminating in that orc reveal, I genuinely smiled at this. Remember, these aren't people who've seen orcs in centuries. These are monsters of myth to them. So, for now at least, first two episodes, the Southlands has gotten pretty good. I am keeping Theo separate from this. Theo, you can tell they're setting him up with that sword for another plot line. I can't get a feel for where they're going with that. So, if and when Theo shows back up, I will judge his subplot, which has only just begun, and really had no impact in this episode other than establishing he exists. So if you didn't like him, fine. I'm considering Theo part of the next episode that fully focuses on him. For me, this was just the Bronwyn Arondir stuff, okay? And it was actually pretty good. I'm not going to bother splitting this off into a separate video. I'm going to keep it short. That in conclusion of everything, just I went storyline by storyline. I wanted to end with the stuff that didn't work for me. And it's really just two things that I wanted to mention. First, it's weird that they refer to the race of men as humans. The books don't do that, the movies don't do that, and it just strikes me as weird. That, in the first episode, Rondir's guard is saying, oh, there's only been two romances between elves and humans. And then the Harfoots are going, Meteor Man can't be a human or an elf. What is he? That everyone refers to it as humans in this. I know it's a translation convention, because, they're speaking Elvish, they're speaking Harfoot, they're speaking Khuzdul. But it's just strikes me as so weird when they say human. I know people in the fandom do, but this whole thing. The stuff that didn't work for me was Galadriel's story in the second episode, which the whole send her to Valinor thing, that you wonder, like, okay, can elves just go, hey, I'm skipping out on guard duty, I'm going back to Valinor? That's a question. But I imagine that, like, on general principle for regular soldiers, Gil-galad can go, I release you from your sworn service for X amount of time. You are free to go to Valinor now. Fine, they never really worked out the specifics of that. Galadriel specifically, though, there's the whole thing that the Valar told her she couldn't come back because she's the last of the originals. The original ringleaders of the High Elves before they came back, and that would take too long to explain, doesn't happen anyway, and maybe she would have been turned back if she tried to go. That's something. In and of itself, that isn't even a problem. I understand and I accept as a given. Let me make that clear. That they needed a reason to send Galadriel to Numenor, which we know will happen next episode. That, on general principle, I don't have a problem with that, even though it's an invention. You need to send a viewpoint character. And people saying, oh, she swam across half an ocean. Did they show you a map? We saw her swimming for a bit, then encountering a shipwreck. How do you know she wasn't just, like, swimming for 6 hours or something? That's not a whole ocean. But it just struck me as odd, the whole thing. And I think it's because of whatever they're doing with that Halbrand guy, that they're clearly setting him up for something. He seems shifty, and that it wasn't just about, let's invent action scenes. It's they were inventing 3 different things there to set up Halbrand. First, the initial attack by the sea monster, right? And that he's willing to abandon everyone else. Then a nice dialogue-only thing with her on the shipwreck, and then him saving her in a storm, right? 3 big scenes. You could have cut the first and second ones and it would have been the same episode. That if it was just, oh, she came across a shipwreck with this guy Halbrand on it, and purely had that dialogue where she's going, I've been fighting the forces of darkness for so long that if I started naming all the people I've lost now, the sun would set, because I'm thousands of years old. That was really good, well acted, and in character for Galadriel, but this Halbrand guy just feels like such an archetype of the shifty rogue who, is he good or is he bad? And they're clearly setting him up for something. I hope he's not like their new Aragorn figure. We'll see more next episode, of course. But it felt like they just needed action scenes to pad it out. It felt like padding. And it's not, oh, all the race stuff. This is with... And it's nothing to do with, oh, it's action scenes for Galadriel. It's her being lost at sea. It's not even a warrior scene. Because she's just, swimming away, and then the monster attacks her, then she gets nearly drowned. And a lot of time and effort behind the scenes was put into that. I mean, it was so annoying that every cover story in, like, Empire Magazine and stuff, they'd be focusing on that they filmed the her almost drowning thing in this giant water tank set. The amount of time and effort that has gone into setting up this Halbrand guy. And is he like a minor character on the scale of Bronwyn? Is he going to turn into the Witch King? I don't know. But I will say they invested a ton of time in a character that up till now it has no payoff. And it feels like it derailed Galadriel's story. And even, I was prepared that the general idea that she gets derailed and goes to Numenor wouldn't feel like derailing to me. I knew, well, maybe she'll go for allies. Maybe she'll go to check on them. Somehow, even accepting that she had to go to Numenor, all the time on that trip spent setting up Halbrand felt like it was derailing it. So I'm not sure where they're going with that. That Galadriel's story felt like it was treading water in episode 2, pun intended. Haha. But that is the point that really dragged me down in this, was the Halbrand guy. And it dragged down Galadriel's story, which could have been a lot shorter. It could have just been, oh, and I got picked up by a Numenorian ship, and here I am in episode 2. Why do we need to set up this guy? What is going on with that? And I'll conclude by, Tolkien languages, pointing out a language thing, which I tried to mention this to people as we were going through language barriers. That I would ask, and they didn't understand what I was saying, would people from different regions understand each other? Because this is thousands of years before the common speech, Westron, is a thing. That logically, when they're in Lindon, right, Galadriel, Elrond, and Gil-galad are speaking Elvish. Well, probably Quenya, which is High Elvish, or even Sindar, and everyone knows those. And when Elrond goes to Khazad-dûm, it stands to reason that through trade the dwarves know Elvish, or he said he's been to Khazad-dûm before as an envoy, so maybe he knows Khuzdul. Then again, they don't speak Khuzdul around the home. It's, you're a good little dwarf who goes to dwarf school once a week to learn Khuzdul as a lore language for special ceremonies. It's like going to Hebrew school. And the idea is, so I don't know if he either they would probably be speaking Quenya as their everyday trade speech, because they trade with the elves, or if not, he knows the language of men, whatever local mannish language from the Easterlings that the dwarves speak on a day-to-day basis, he knows. So there wouldn't be a language barrier with Khazad-dûm or Eregion or any of these other places. That entire, of the three main storylines, that's fine. The Harfoots probably aren't speaking Elvish, even though we hear English when we see Galadriel in Lindon, and we hear English from the Harfoots. It's a translation convention that presumably they're speaking whatever language they used to have, because the Harfoots don't interact with Galadriel or any other set of people. It doesn't matter, right? It's translated for our benefit. Like when Durin IV is speaking with his father Durin III, they might even be speaking in Khuzdul. We wouldn't know. They translate it into English for our benefit. I'm fine with that. Southlands, they've established that the elves like Arondir who were there, he's been there for almost 80 years, he knows the local language. Also fine. I could even say that through clearly contact with Arondir, if Bronwyn ever met Galadriel, she would know enough Elvish to speak with her or something. The plot mechanics behind Halbrand and her on the raft, from a language barrier point, don't make sense. That even Numenor, you can kind of go, well, they know Quenya there, or she must have, before they turned the elves away, she learned Adonaic, which is their current language before Westron. Think of the order of events. This is what I'm building up to. Galadriel comes on the shipwreck. The people don't immediately recognize she's an elf, even though she's talking, right? So she's not speaking in Elvish. She's speaking in whatever language they're using. Yet, Galadriel can't recognize where Halbrand is from what language he is speaking. There wasn't common speech yet. So, do humans from Nirn and Khand and Mordor and Harad to Eriador and stuff all speak Adonaic now or something? Is there one common lingua franca in the Second Age for humans? I don't think there would be. Or maybe we'll see that with the Numenorians have been around for a while, so maybe they're speaking Adonaic. That is a thing I would ask the writers, because it doesn't make much sense of, okay, clearly she's not speaking Elvish to them, otherwise they would have realized she's an elf. Why couldn't she recognize from his speech that he's from the Southlands? Maybe because the South... So what does Bronwyn speak then? Is it some multi-regional trade language? That this is the type of thing that Tolkien nerds really get into, of this is before the common speech was a thing. I think it's just, is this supposed to be a hint about Halbrand not being who he says he is? Like, is he the Witch King of Angmar, or going to be the Witch King of Angmar or something? Because they do set up that, again, also, the middle scene was good. It was world building, where they go, oh, I've lost friends, and then he reveals I'm actually from the Southlands. That's why I'm mentioning Halbrand here, because that was the one thing that really didn't sit well with me. The other things like, oh, they call them humans, or annoyances. The Halbrand thing didn't work. Apparently it's tied to the Southlands story, so I'm lumping it in here at the end of the Southlands. And I just really hope that when Galadriel isn't around Halbrand from scenes we've seen in trailers, that her storyline will get good again, because I really didn't like how they're handling him. And it's just, either this is really bad storytelling, or you're going somewhere with this. I can't tell. My biggest fears from all of this, some people go, oh, this show doesn't respect the lore. If anything, I think they're trying too hard to respect the lore by dropping Easter eggs out of context, like going, oh, Fëanor made the Silmarils with this. You didn't explain what the Silmarils are. I don't think this was very new viewer friendly. If you only saw the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit trilogy, they're not. You need to slowly introduce things. You can't just go, oh, here's stuff. Like the Southlands, they bothered to slowly set up, we have earthquakes, oh, the ground is poisoned, then it turns out there's orcs. They are capable of slowly setting something up if they put their mind to it. I can't unread the Silmarillion. I read the print off of it 25 years ago. Tell me in the comments that it's not the lore nerds that I worry about. We can take the hits. I knew they'd have to simplify some stuff. Like I said with the prologue, with Morgoth, that they don't mention Ungoliant, they don't mention the Silmarils, just the Morgoth destroyed the 2 trees. Fine. Just in conclusion here, the thing I'm really worried about is, I know what's going on because I read the books. I'm actually afraid that they are making it too complicated to be accessible. With the High Elf storyline, when it comes to the invented stuff like the Harfoots and the Southlands, I'm as much of a noob here as the rest of you. So, this was, in conclusion, the series is just good enough that I'm intrigued. I'm not quite hyped. I'm not emotionally invested in these characters, but we're 2 episodes in, so that's kind of unfair to say. That I'm not emotionally attached to Nori Brandyfoot or Rondir. Well, I am to Elrond and Galadriel, but not necessarily these iterations of Elrond and Galadriel. Durin the Fourth, he's likable. He actually, Durin the Fourth and Disa are likable. And I would like to see more of them, but I'm not, in love with them yet. But we'll see what happens. It's good enough that I'm going to keep following it, just to check on it. People going, why would you review something that's not good? Dude, that's what I did with Game of Thrones. You review things even if they're bad to critique them, and this isn't bad. It's like a 7 out of 10. There were points where I saw glimmers of 8 out of 10, but the Halbrand stuff and the needless setting him up so much with so much screen time, but there's got to be a storm that he saves her from, and a water tank scene, and a sea monster, that was like a 5 out of 10 for me. I really did not like that Halbrand stuff, because he invented character. Like, Bronwyn and Arondir by episode 2 were okay. And I don't know what's going on with Theo, he didn't really come back that much, but, on the upper end of 7 out of 10, like 7.7-ish out of 10. And there were some glimmers of really good stuff, the dialogue thing between Durin and Elrond on the elevator. People who thought this would be movie quality out of the gate, I don't even blame the showrunners, because like when they're doing the original stuff in the Southlands, it was pretty decent. They have to make some stark condensation choices, which might end up ruining the story. The way I'll phrase it is, some condensations will be bad, but the question is, were they inevitable? That the mere fact that we can't have an anthology covering 1,000 years of the rise of Sauron, we know Elendil is in the next episode. This all has to take place within at least a century, because they live a long time. We know there are condensations coming. Will they be bad? Will they be generally for a TV audience? And even then, I don't think they had a choice, that they had to condense this. And it might feel bad that this doesn't really work as condensation, simply because the source, you see what I'm saying, the source material is not easily adaptable. But even if we're suffering from condensation things, I wouldn't really blame the showrunners, McKay and Payne. I get the sense they're trying, but faced with the limit of it all has to roughly take place within the same century. It can't span multiple sets of human generations, but within Elendil's lifetime, I don't envy them for that. And that there's no dialogue from the books to fall back on. So I got the sense that these guys are trying, and they're trying really hard. But this may be an impossible task. And I was surprised it was as good as it was, and even then, I said in the other thing, I don't even expect Season 1 to be great. It's the foundation the rest of the show is built on. It's an introduction. So long as Season 1 ends just solid enough, not great, but solid, that people will tune in for Season 2, and then Season 2 can hit the ground running, we'll be okay. That I don't expect Season 1 to wow me. But how many times have we had other slow burn shows where people went, oh, the first season of this is great, and you're like, yeah, and then you come back 3 years later and everyone's talking about it. Like Game of Thrones Season 1 was good, but the media ignored it until Season 3, really. So just any of those other shows, it's a slow burn in the background. If someone told you, oh, Season 1 of this great show called Breaking Bad, and you're like, yeah, I'll watch that whenever, then by Season 3, you're kicking yourself, why didn't I get into this 2 years ago, into Breaking Bad Season 1? So this show has potential for me, but I don't expect it to pay off even by the end of the season. That I will see what it's like in Season 2. I'll tell you right now, if they do anything that I feel is actively bad, that is contradicting the spirit of what they're trying to do, there might even be clunky dialogue. So far, the only thing that strikes me as odd is Halbrand, but I'm giving that a pass for now because I can tell they're going somewhere with it. I will judge it in later episodes. So that's where we stand right now. And please like and subscribe. I have a playlist of all these videos. I am backlogged. I need to review episode 3 now. Please hang on for that, because I was messed up from the Labor Day weekend holiday this week, threw my whole schedule out, because that's a weekend where you go traveling instead of sitting at home editing things. But I have been catching up. I got like 2 hours of content just in the first 2 episodes, but it was a double episode premiere of a giant new fantasy show that I had to devote time to, giving an overview of the show, an overview of this is how they're handling the Harfoots. This will be shorter when it's just, oh, and in episode 5, this is what the Harfoots are doing, as opposed to introducing the entire world. So, in the coming month, there won't be yet another giant fantasy series having a double episode series premiere. This was the last big hurdle, the last big new thing dumped on my schedule. After this, I'll be catching up. Please stick around. I know it'll be a slow burn now, but my mentality is 3 years from now, I might be kicking myself that I didn't cover Season 1 as it was coming out episode by episode, if indeed it does build up to being that good. It's the first season. It's really hard to adapt. And I think they did some pretty good things in there. There was clever stuff. It is a little rough. It needs some refinement. But we haven't even met the Numenorians yet, so let me rush on to episode 3, where we know from trailers they'll introduce Elendil and Isildur and everyone, and that is a major part of the Second Age story. I've seen people who have seen the 3rd episode already saying they should have released the first 3 back-to-back, because that's the final major location and set of characters. Elendil, Tarmiriel, Ar-Pharazôn, and all of that. Maybe so, but I'm going to head on and review that now. So please leave your comments. I try to answer all of them, and check back for episode 3.